All right, guys, we are live. Today is Friday, March 25th, and you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us at our simultaneous Twitter chat at #CMGR Hangout, where I see a bunch of you are now. Hey, Jen Chen, see you over there in my stream, so you're at the top. So thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. If you love what you're seeing today or hearing, or maybe you have an idea for another topic, please head over to our website at mycmgr.com. Click on the participate button up at the top, fill out the form, and that information comes to Sherry and I, and we'll get back to you. And it's really your ideas and this community that keeps these Fridays going. Sherry and I just help facilitate the Hangouts. So what do we have for you this week? Well, this week's topic is protecting your community career. Really this whole topic stemmed from Catherine Mancuso brought up the open source community's outrage over O'Reilly's community managers being laid off in the middle of O'Reilly's annual conference. And that whole event just brought up some really significant questions for community professionals, like how we best support each other when we lose our jobs suddenly due to no fault of our own, and best practices for letting go a team member, what you can do proactively when you find yourself in those shoes. And so thanks to Stuart, who's also here, for suggesting today's topic based on Catherine's CMX conversation. And I'm just going to start with letting people introduce themselves, and let's start with Stuart. Hey, Stuart, thanks for hanging out with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me. My name is Stuart Banky, and I am the manager for the Rackspace community. Our mission is basically to assist with many-to-many support using the different channels that we have. So if you have questions or want to learn about how to build a solution regarding our products, you go there and get involved, and we do what we can to help you out.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey, Sherry.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, everybody. I'm Sherry Reddy. I'm the community manager at Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, and I also co-produce CMGR Hangout here with Brew.
Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Simmons, former community manager emeritus at O'Reilly Media. I covered OSCON and Fluent Conference, so web technology and open source. And I'm starting a new adventure at Google's open source programs office as a program manager in about a week and a half here.
Excellent. Hey, everybody. I'm Brew, Director of Awesome with BTC Revolutions, co-producer here at My Community Manager with Sherry. So, Josh, if you could just kind of help set up the whole framework here before we dive into questions, can you give our listeners, really just a background of what happened?
Sure thing, and please don't mind the Pico cat here. So, sure enough, a couple weeks ago, we were in the middle of O'Reilly Fluent Conference, which is their annual web technology conference, and I'd worked Fluent since 2014. And more or less, O'Reilly had, if you're familiar with Safari Books Online, that's a joint venture that O'Reilly had started with Pearson a number of years ago. Last year, or maybe it was the year before, O'Reilly bought out Pearson's half of Safari Books Online. So in the time since then, O'Reilly's been going through a merger, effectively. So, you've got two 250 headcount companies coming together. As most people know, when there's mergers, there are almost inevitably layoffs. But what was interesting is the Thursday of the layoff, the company got an email saying business restructuring, and a lot of folks expected something to happen, expected redundancies or efficiencies, whatever it is. We didn't expect the community team to be a part of that restructuring. So it wasn't just restructuring, it was the company making a change in strategy going forward. So now the company is doing more social media, and they have a partner program that does some community outreach, but the community managers were the ones who sort of fed the partner program. Suffice it to say, there is no more community team at O'Reilly. We have 3 community managers total who were laid off, 2 on the O'Reilly side, 1 on the Safari side, and that's more or less the sum of it.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks for that background. Well, let's jump into our first question, which is, what are some tips for networking and advocating for your work internally?
I guess I can start if no one else wants to jump in there. So one of the things that I think is really important for networking and building strong internal advocates is to really ensure that the decision makers know how you're impacting the business. So if there's a specific metric that your community is aligned towards, making sure that you are regularly reporting that out, you're showing the impact, you're showing how you're furthering that impact, and also allowing them to give you more input into here are some additional things. It might be not your primary KPI, but it might be like some ancillary KPIs. So if your main impact is doing something like support deflection, make sure you're a strong advocate on how much support you're deflecting. But then also if marketing is asking for assistance or you're helping other groups and maybe events marketing or channel acquisition or something like that, make sure that you're also reporting those out and you're building strong advocates by showing that you are making an impact with those other groups as well.
This is a point that I don't necessarily feel qualified to speak to, because I'll say that I was a community manager at O'Reilly for 2.5 years, and we never quite mustered the support or understanding of the work that we did at the company. And it was only toward the end when people really got to understand the things that we were doing, the value that we were bringing to the table. Certainly something that we failed to do that should have happened, I think, much earlier on, was to have those KPIs and to be servicing those regularly. At O'Reilly, half of our job was a social media effectively, and so the reporting on social media and the associated conversions or revenue, etc., that's straightforward. But what we failed to do was develop the other half of the metrics for our community engagement, the outreach, and advocacy work that we were doing. And so I have a sense that had we taken the lack of KPIs on the community side more seriously, then perhaps this wouldn't have been something that happened. But again, I don't necessarily feel terribly qualified to speak to this point, having not succeeded in it.
I actually have been in similar shoes before. I was at a company where they actually did really value me, but I don't think they could really identify the importance of community necessarily. And I don't know that I could clearly articulate it at the time either. Like, I knew that it was very important, but I couldn't at the time articulate why it was important. And so when that company went through a restructuring, I was one of many that got let go, and it was basically all but co-founders. So I don't know that there was anything I could have done in retrospect anyway, not being a co-founder. But since then, I've learned a lot about metrics and a lot about proving your value. And I think it's very similar to what I think Stuart said this, where if you can find out what your company's business objectives are and at least pick one or two of those that you can really align with as community, and maybe it's even that's not your whole story, but that's a way to let executives know why company. In my opinion, that goes so far. I'm really lucky in the fact that community is very centric to what we do, and all the way up to our CEO understands that and even engages with the community, but that's not always the case. And when you can find those business objectives and make sure that you get that constantly in front of your exec team, what the community is doing for the company, it helps so much.
Yeah, a topic we've talked about here in our Hangouts, when we talk about kind of reporting back up to internally, it has a lot to do also with making sure that you're not just focused on numbers, but also, there's a lot of just, I guess you could say, qualitative versus quantitative, storytelling, if you will, that can happen, right? We from the agency side of things, and so I come from a perspective of, I work for an agency. We do community management. That's a pretty large line item on our kind of monthly retainers with our clients, and so we're always having to prove the value of the community management aspect for the brands. And what we found is that, definitely you want to be providing numbers to show growth, and maybe one day you can build a pretty chart, show that you're on a good trajectory. But what really matters is those is just the storytelling. Just something as simple as each day I'm gonna find one cool thing that I would tell my buddy about what I was proud of that day. And after a week, you have 7 of those. After a month, you have about 30 or whatever that is. And maybe you boil that down and you cut some out. But those reports are like propaganda that you can start giving around the office, even like, hey, check this out. Because when you're sitting there all day, tuned into the conversations and tuned into the communities, it's really easy for you to have those feels, about the community, understand what you're doing is right and valuable. But sometimes that's hard for other people to understand. And so by letting them peer into sort of the best of the conversations, or the best little micro case studies each day, I think that goes a long way with most people. So. All right, let's jump into question number 2, which is how can you make sure you're developing skills that are critical to the organization? What do you think about that?
I'll let you go, Josh. You clicked it first.
Cool. So I think there are, this is so context dependent, right? And depending on what kind of community you're managing, or what kind of community you're serving, and what kind of organization you're in, there's a whole slew of skills that you may need. For instance, as a community manager in a technical context, it was important for me to stay current on, well, the very technologies that the communities are using. But there's also the, technology is moving quickly, and we all know that, but community as a profession is moving pretty damn quickly itself, as it's evolved a lot in the last just couple years even. I think it's important to, I think it was Stuart who brought this up, and Jerry who echoed it, that we need to be aligning ourselves with the sort of the organizational goals, right? So at O'Reilly, we're serving technical communities, so the technologies are something we need to be aware of and apprised of. But we're also, and O'Reilly is also a media company, right? So it was helpful for us as community managers to be sharp writers, so that we can communicate, to be, heck, to even have an understanding of the advertising that the company was doing in terms of pay-per-click campaigns and internet radio advertising. Because while the marketing department is taking the lead on making those ads happen, we as community managers, knowing the audience, can help craft the messaging, can help choose keywords, such that we're not only doing community work in a public way and doing outreach work in a public way, but inside the organization we're also refining everything that they do, such that the entire marketing department feels our value because we assist them with everything.
No, those are really good points. And you were right, because community managers, they have to have an extremely diverse skill set. It's not like you are someone who's just a copywriter. You are someone you have to do editing, you have to do content creation, you have to do curation, you have to be able to also have a knowledge of the products and talk as an expert to them in many cases. So I think one of the ways that in terms of the business understanding how the community is impacting and growing those skills, one thing you always need to be aware of is when you're in a business, you need to identify, kind of going back to that business 101 sort of graph you see, you need to understand what your cash cows are within the business, and you need to understand what your rising stars are. And if you have a strong understanding of your cash cows, and you help the stars as they're emerging within the market and taking market share, and you become an expert in that as well, when those become cash cows, then you're also set. Because not only do they see you as someone who's a community manager and has all these skills, but they also see you as someone who continues to have a diverse knowledge of the product portfolio and can speak about it at a broad range, and that may add more value to you as a community professional within the organization, especially when you're looking at something like, okay, do we put this person to a new position, or do we change the way that the team is functioning? You'll have more input if you have more knowledge about overall what the company's high-achieving kind of product lines or services or offerings are.
Yeah, it's really important to be a subject matter expert in whatever your community is built around. So if that's your product, then you better be familiar with the product, and as it changes and learns, like keep learning it. Because you don't ever want to be, you can be in that position where you're like, I don't know, let me go ask, but it's better if you have at least some sort of understanding so that you can be frontline answering questions too when you're connecting people. And it gives you a better sense of who to connect them with or what to connect them with as far as resources as well.
If I may jump in, there's something else that occurred to me. So not only are we as community professionals responsible for maintaining our professional development in terms of our community skills, and also being familiar with the products or the things that the community we're serving is using. Following on what Stuart mentioned in terms of your cash cows and knowing really the fundamentals of the business, something that we experienced inside of O'Reilly is that there are lots of different stakeholders. So there's the community, right, which is kind of an overloaded word. There's a bunch of communities out there that we're serving. O'Reilly being a media company, not only are we serving people who consume media from O'Reilly or go to O'Reilly conferences, there's also the sponsors, there are also the speakers, there are also the authors, there are also the tech reviewers on the books. So there are a bunch of different audiences that are all very important to O'Reilly and the business for different reasons. And so being able to add value in each of those areas, I think, is something that was valued, but perhaps something that wasn't developed as strongly as it could have been while we were there.
That's a great point. I think one of the things that probably the first thing that popped into my head when I read this question was I think about the term linchpin. And I don't know if anyone's ever read Seth Godin's Linchpin, but the concept, like in the past, there's like two types of labor, management and labor, right? But really in good organizations, you find that there's labor, there's management, and there's the linchpin. And I think that community managers are really in a unique situation a lot of times, in a unique environment, because they're often asked to know and do so many things, and plus they have the eyes and the ears of really both customer and behind the scenes, that you can quickly become a linchpin, and by helping connect different people internally, externally, learning, by learning what those important things are to the business, and then through your storytelling, being able to show that, hey, look, I'm meeting some of those objectives, even though they might not be quantifiable. Then I loved when you talked about when you're talking about like the keywords and things like that, right? I think I also feel like a lot of the most successful community managers that I've met, you find out they have like a really diverse kind of job background a lot of times, right? They're kind of like the jack of all trades. They've done a bunch of all kinds of shit, both formally and informally, and they're also lifelong learners, right? And so there's people who like, oh, cool, we're doing something with Google Analytics now. Great, let me go learn that. And hey, should I be using UTMs when I'm sending out links? Will that help you guys? Here, whatever, right? And just being able to kind of add those little points of expertise in the conversations where people are like, "Oh, damn, we never thought of that. Thanks." Those are all little qualities of a linchpin that I think, again, I think the community manager is poised at in a lot of companies to be that person, or a linchpin within the organization. All right, so moving on to our third question, which is this. Why is it important to stay connected with other community professionals? So who's maybe a little bit of an obvious answer, but I think there's also probably, we can really expand on this a little bit. So who wants to take it?
I can jump in there real fast. So I think it's really important to network with community professionals, because one of the things that having a network with other people who are doing your job does is give you that emotional support. So whenever something like what happened to Josh happens, you have other people who either have been in the similar shoes or kind of in that same boat or getting to it, and they can help you. They can give you that guidance and that support that you need in order to kind of get past it. But I also think that if I ultimately look back and say what would be like one word or a couple words that I would say that the community summarizes, it's being helpful. And really leveraging the other people that you know within your network as the community profession will allow for them to help you, even if you're not quite necessarily sure where to start. So I think any person who goes into any industry, whether it's you're going into manufacturing and you need to join a union, or you're a community professional and you need to network with other community professionals, I think it's very important that you get involved in what you're doing from an organization standpoint, because there's just so many benefits, and those are only two of them that I can just name off the top of my head.
Absolutely, yes. The the support that I mean, I can't speak for Jason, but I imagine he feels similarly. The support that we felt after being laid off in a public fashion was really it was really uplifting. I mean, being laid off is shocking and sad, especially when you've more or less drank the organizational Kool-Aid. I still love O'Reilly. I still think it's a fantastic organization doing great work, and I'm sad not to be a part of that. But to be able, in all the uncertainty of a layoff, to have our peer professionals not only just consoling or commiserating, but also offering up new opportunities and helping us figure out what that next step is. I mean, I can't remember the last time I found that many job opportunities in a matter of 72 hours. I mean, the way everybody came out to support us was really fantastic. And so it's to have a support network in times like that, and throughout the rest of the year, or throughout the rest of our careers when we're not getting laid off or let go, whatever. It's also critical to be around each other so that we can learn from each other. Just like in technology, again, moving fast, the best way to stay on top of it is to be around other technology professionals who can filter up the important bits to you. The very same is true of community professionals. Things are changing quickly, the tools, the metrics, and even just the job definitions change pretty rapidly. So being around each other and being able to stay apprised of that change, I mean, it's critical. And I really can't imagine not having been plugged into this community. I can't imagine what this would have been like without having been plugged into this community. So, by the way, thank you all.
Yeah, I love what you said about learning from each other, because, at a lot of companies, you're usually one of a handful of people there, right? Or a handful of people who do that type of job, right? You do sales. A lot of times you definitely, you might be on a sales team or an accounts team, or, there's always someone you can talk to about the same position. But I think more times than often, community managers are out on their own islands, it's great when they get the opportunity to have small groups within one organization, but yeah, I mean, keeping connected to the industry. Yeah, I can't even tell you how much I've learned from community managers just over the last couple of years, just talking to people and being connected. And those are things that you can't learn from a book. You probably necessarily wouldn't learn on your own. So yeah, it's a great point. Sherry, do you have anything to add to this, or shall I move us to question 4?
I don't know. Every time I talk, I use a different microphone, and it's messed up.
Oh,
So.
you sound great right now.
For me, it's been imperative for learning and for support as I've moved through several roles just since getting involved with my community manager, which I found originally as someone trying to figure out what community management was. So, yeah, it's huge to have support around you of people who understand what you're doing, especially if you're not lucky enough to have a community team at your company, because then you feel even more alone. But when you have a community team and your company gets it, it's great, but it's also still good to be connected to other experts who have been there, done that, have experience, so you can bounce things off them and be like, hey, how did this work for you? Or I was thinking about this, because you never know what you might not think of that someone else would think of.
Rolling us into question number 4 here. What are some of the tips for networking externally with other community professionals? So we kind of talked about why it's important. So how does one go about doing it? And go. That's
Two obvious ones, the CMX Facebook group where this conversation started, and shameless plug, Seamjar Hangout is a good place to connect with people. I'll let you guys continue now.
So a couple of the resources that I use, of course, CMX, fantastic, thank you. There's also, for those of us who are working in technical communities, there's the there's the Evangelist Collective. I think it's evangelistcollective.github.io. There's a Slack instance that's associated with that. That has been incredibly valuable for me. So shout out to the folks who run that. I think Mary Thingvall and Davey Shafiq is behind that as well. Anywho, so that's an excellent resource. I also have found the annual Community Leadership Summit to be very valuable. That's run by Jono Bacon in the weekend before OSCON. I am no longer the OSCON community manager, but I will still not be missing Community Leadership Summit this year. It's in May in Austin. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I was going to also recommend trying to find where there are summits or conferences for the community organization. Those are very powerful. I'll be at the summit too, so I'll see you up there. I also think you can find ways to network just by seeing who interacts with your content, and not necessarily the content that you're publishing for the people who are consuming the purpose of your community. That helps. But also taking a look at who consumes the content that you have whenever you talk about community management. And then if there's people who like that content or share it or find something valuable from it, engaging those. And that can be something as simple as dropping somebody a note saying, hey, I saw that you like this. What about it did you like? Do you want to continue the conversation? Or would you like to kind of share some stuff back and forth and make this a more powerful piece of content? And then that helps build relationships and kind of allows you to extend your network as well. So even that one-to-one opportunity based upon what you decide to find valuable sometimes allows for you to expand your network as well.
All right, so rolling us into question number 5. Where can you turn for support if you're let go from your role? So obviously the community, that's kind of what this whole topic is, but where else?
So the community, absolutely. Our peer professionals, absolutely. There's a talk that I give, a presentation I give called Fail Well, because I have failed a whole lot, and a big portion of the farewell talk is, what do you do after the fact? When things get shitty, basically. And I think it's important to really take your self-care seriously in those moments. And so for myself, I'll go hiking, I'll go to the beach, whatever, but I will make sure to be spending time with my friends and family, and maybe spending a little less time online, but just making sure that, in the wake of something awful, it's easy to withdraw. It's easy to want to just hide under a rock and not engage with the world. But that's probably one of, maybe it's good to do that for a little bit, but it's probably one of the more dangerous things you could do over a period of time. So I really encourage people just to, spend some quality time with your friends and family and regain some perspective on everything. I know that that's been a reliable tactic for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a couple of different ways to approach it, right? You have that emotional perspective, and you have to make sure that you get that addressed. So if you're looking at it and you need that comfort, friends and family, perfect place to turn. I think there's also value here. If you don't have a mentor, I recommend you get one, leveraging the advice of your mentor. This is one of those things where, since they aren't necessarily directly impacted by it, they can give you maybe a different perspective, or maybe a call of action, or some clarity on something that you might not have thought of, and give you kind of a different path. It may not necessarily be that your next title is community manager, kind of in like Josh's example too, but you still have a community around you. You're still fostering your community within that role, so you're still leveraging those skills. It's just maybe you kind of focus on your energy towards maybe a different path, or maybe they know of something that's available for you as part of your network, and they can assist in making those connections as well.
I think the other I think another place to kind of go to is, just somebody close to you, just a friend. I mean, I think this is like a maybe advice, just in general, not even if you're a community manager, just like when you're let go, right? Is just take a minute and just go talk to somebody close to you, because it's usually an emotional thing, and a lot of times you're kind of really like caught off guard. And one of the things that one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given in my life was to just take a little time for yourself, breathe for a moment, and then ask yourself, like, hey, what do I want to do? What's my what does my ideal place look like? And don't just rush into getting the next job, unless it's the right job for you. Now, obviously, financial circumstances, you might have to just go pick up that other job. But if you can, slow yourself down just a little bit. So question number 6 is, what resources exist for those looking for a new community role? So you guys know, I mean, are there job boards out there? Are there, what kind of resources? Anyone?
I've noticed that there's a job board on the Community Roundtable website. There's also a really strong kind of notification system within like the CMX hub, so people dropping in there saying, hey, #job or job opportunities, I got some stuff coming up, anybody interested for it, or there's some new openings, we're hiring for somebody. I've also seen some people go in there and say, hey, I'm looking for something, does anybody have anything available? So those are great opportunities. I also think if you kind of know where the hubs of community management are within your area, so like in Texas, for example, Austin is our predominant location. There's also like San Francisco, Seattle, New York. If you know where to look, then it kind of helps finding those jobs feel like less of a looking for a needle in a haystack and more of kind of a targeted search, and being able to find what you're comfortable with.
Sure. Do you know of any places? I know a long time ago. I feel like a long time ago, my community manager had like some job postings, but I know we don't anymore.
I always send people to the CMX job board, to the community roundtable job board, and then someone, and I apologize because I was busy trying to tweet the CMX one, so I'm not sure which one of you just said it, mentioned local listings, and that's a great place too. So whenever people tell me they're looking for something in LA, I send them to builtinla.com. Because it's like a hub for technology jobs in LA, and that's a great place to look. So yeah, it totally depends on if area matters to you or not, and how much you want them filtered for you already. Because I know CMX and I think Community Roundtable filter through everything that's submitted before they go on there. On mycmgr.com, instead of doing the posting that we used to do, there's actually an RSS feed of the CMX job postings on the sidebar. So that's just usually my go-to when people ask.
And shameless plug, I'm always looking for great community managers, and sometimes the timing is just right. Over the last year, I think we picked up some rock stars. Just, we definitely had some shoes to fill, and or we had some shoes. And anyways, that was a bad analogy. I totally botched it. But anyways, yeah. So if you're ever looking for a job, hit me up. So all right. Josh, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just real briefly, another plug for if you're a community professional in technology, another plug for the Evangelist Collective. I think it's the recruiting channel on their Slack team is invaluable.
Recruiting channel. Hang on, I'm gonna try. Josh, you're sounding like that robot, like you were earlier. So we're gonna have to reboot you into the channel. But yeah, why don't we just do that, and then we'll get your answer again. We'll just take a second. All right. This is live. People expect stuff to happen. No big deal. We'll just edit
now
that
interrupt your regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah. I'll sing and dance a little. It's fine.
Please do.
All right, Josh. Oh, good. Yeah, we can hear you. So yeah, could you repeat what you said?
Absolutely. So just another plug for the Evangelist Collective. If you're a community professional in technology, they have a recruiting channel on their Slack team, which is amazing. And I just wanted to have a quick sidebar. There's no question that addresses this directly, but I think this is an appropriate place to mention it. I noticed through most of my career, I have not been very good at career management, which is to say that when my startup fired me in 2013, I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't see it coming, and I didn't have plans. So I spent 7 months trying to find the next job, which was as a community manager. The reason that I was able to rebound so quickly in this case from O'Reilly and land at Google was because about 6 months ago I started realizing that, well, maybe this is not the best place for me. And so while I couldn't do a public job search, and I wasn't doing much of an active job search, I let people who were close to me know that I was looking for other opportunities and exploring things. So that allowed me to get the ball rolling with Google early on, and it just so happened that I got the offer one day after being laid off. But I guess my point is, if you feel like you're doing things right and you're not getting the support for your team or for yourself internally at the organization you're with, keep fighting the good fight, but maybe also start looking for other opportunities on the down low.
Yeah, very much so. The best time to job search is when you're not pressured to job search. I've been there as well, and if you're not loving it, it doesn't hurt to look for what else is out there. Because if it's not the best fit for you, it's probably not the best fit for the company either. And it's so much easier to interview when you're not stressed out about interviewing, because you're not like, how am I going to pay rent next month? Instead, you're just like, well, I'm looking for something better. And even if it's not totally the right fit when you're looking around, at least you're getting practice interviewing and applying and stuff too for when you do find something that you love.
Awesome. Oh, let's see. We were on 5. Now we're on. That would make us on 6. So what resources? No, is that the one we just did?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're on 7.
I got lost for a minute. Sorry about that. I got thrown off by that live reboot. Okay, number 7 is how can we help support community professionals in their job search? So what are some ways we can help out our fellow folks when they're looking for jobs?
I can jump in. So I think the first thing is you have to be understanding with the individual. I mean, it's something that's emotional when you're let go, and they might not necessarily be actively ready to engage with this situation the moment that they're let go, or maybe after a short period of time. So you have to be willing to kind of you provide them support, but also kind of let them have their space a little bit. But that's when you can, when they're ready, that's when you can really start working with that person, understanding what they're looking for. And then if they don't necessarily have a strong network, you can leverage the contacts within your network to kind of facilitate some of those interactions and allow for them to really kind of make those connections they need in order to find that next best thing. I can't stress enough how important it is to really leverage that network that you have and leverage other people's network, because it may not necessarily be your network that you find something. It might be your buddies who might not even be in the same industry, but yet he still has connections to people who are looking for somebody to do something with your skill set. So always kind of keep that in mind whenever you're out there looking. Is those indirect contacts also are very valuable.
I want to echo at least one thing that Stuart just said. You know, being let go is an emotional thing, and while the outpouring of support was uplifting and it kept it from being a total, like, kept it from being totally devastating personally, I still have maybe 100, 150 people to get back to. You know, it was, you know, there were a lot of public messages, and I tried to respond to as many as I could, and there were a lot of people private messaging me and people offering opportunities. And that was really encouraging. It was really fantastic to know that there were all these opportunities. But at the same time, I didn't have the energy or bandwidth to really take it all in. You know, it was overwhelming in a good way, but it was still overwhelming. And so, you know, depending on your relationship with the individual, you know, maybe you can ask can, like, you know, express your condolences and ask, like, hey, there are things I'm aware of, like, do you want me to let you know about this now, or do you need more time, or, you know, where are you at with this? How can I be, you know, most helpful right now? And I think that's probably you know, not specific to this question, but just in general when being supportive with people. You know, you don't necessarily want to jump to a solution. You want to maybe just hear them out or express your sympathies initially. I didn't actually have a direct answer to the question, but I just wanted to underscore that from Stuart.
It is okay to underscore things. We have no rules here. Yeah, I think, boy, it's just like help in any way you can, right? Because you never know when it's going to come back and you're going to need help, right? It's just like be a go-giver. All right, so number 8, we're rolling into our last question, and then Christine, I know you're watching. We do have your tweet. We're going to bring it in next after question 8, and for all of the rest of you hanging out with us over on Twitter, go ahead and send in your questions. We will have a little bit of time. So question number 8 is this: it's if a company needs to let go of a community professional, just how should it be handled? Whew, it's a tough one.
I may be a little too close to the fire, but I have a few thoughts at least. I believe that the way that the O'Reilly community team was laid off was partially a side effect of the fact that other people who were not on the community team were being laid off at the same time. And I don't think that the company considered that maybe there's a different way to approach it when you're laying off a public-facing employee. In our case, it would have been great to have some notice and to have been able to build some, gosh, it sounds Orwellian, messaging around it, such that the community understands why this is happening. People, when Jason and I were let go, there were people who wondered whether we were let go, whether we were fired, or what happened and why. What does it mean for the community? What does it mean for O'Reilly? And from O'Reilly, there's been nothing but deafening silence. And so that's left Jason and I in a position to sort of explain what happened. And so something that I think would have been valuable is to have been given some notice and then to be able to collaborate with the company to say, like, in O'Reilly's case, it was that they're making a strategic decision not to have community as part of the strategy. And if they would have just said that, I think that would have been helpful. People may still not like it, but it would have clarified things a lot for people, and it certainly would have put less burden on Jason and I individually to tell the story that O'Reilly has remained completely silent on.
Yeah, boy, that's interesting because it's like I've definitely hung out with enough HR folks to know that, like, especially like layoffs, right? Like, hey man, there's this way to do it. It's like, okay, we're gonna do it on X day and we're gonna get them done, and it's sort of like you're just going through, and especially when layoffs are inevitable, it's sort of like, look, it's a lot easier just to get it all done, especially when it's in the mass, but in your case, yeah, I guess what really hit me is the fact that, like, yeah, you're public facing. You're like, it's not like a lot of cases. I think there's plenty of job positions out there where if they do a reduction in workforce, you might be missed internally, but it's very rare you're missed externally, right? Wow, yeah. So yeah, there's probably a lot to think about. I mean, I would say that just calling it what it is, right? Like, hey, a lot of our customers and potential customers know who this person is, and they will be missed. So if we have to eliminate or shrink or whatever, like, what's a way? Let's take a step back and work together. Probably, I think, as you said, might be a way to look at it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think companies forget that it is a public-facing person. Like, what would you do if you were letting go of a newscaster or like a spokesman or anything like that? Like, it's very different from other roles. I know of one community professional who was asked, they decided to leave of their own accord, and they were asked not to change their LinkedIn to reflect that they had a new job. And it's just like, okay, well, you can't cover this up forever. You realize that, right? Like, at some point you have to admit, oh, by the way, we don't actually have a community manager anymore. So you should probably stop harassing that person for answers because they're not getting paid by us. So yeah, it's important to understand, like, that is a public role, and you can't hide it, you can't sweep it under the rug, and you do need to address it. Though it's not surprising if a company is cutting their community department that they don't understand that.
And can I jump in here real fast?
Yeah, totally.
So I also think it was brought up just for a moment, but looking within the organization is very important. And I think, especially with roles that are public, like community managers, it's very important to give that person an opportunity to take those skills that they've acquired as a community manager and try to find them within the organization and apply them to another place. And I'm not saying that this is going to be, like, this would have to be one of those things that would be a forever search type thing, but giving that person a reasonable chance to get in there, since they are public, I think that's one way that a company, when they're going through this process, even if they decide, hey, community is not going to be our strategy, that shows that they still have that goodwill and they're willing to protect their brand to some extent, because this public person has also found another place within the organization, and the company allowed them to kind of fill those spots. So that's just something I would recommend. And then as a leader of the team, you also have to keep in mind that, like everyone said, is a public person, so there could be community backlash. So if it's not necessarily something that's formally documented, definitely having some sort of plan of action in mind. So if some sort of backlash comes through, you do have the ability to address it appropriately and protect the brand in which you're an advocate for.
Also, can we just throw out, maybe don't do it at a conference centered around your community? Sorry. Josh is nodding adamantly.
Basically, yes.
All right, I'm gonna switch our gears here and bring in this question here from Christine. And I'm going to just pause for a second because Josh is rebooting his robo voice. And then hopefully...
it reminds me a little bit of, you know those Nickelodeon microphones that distorted your voice, like in 97 or whenever that was? That's what it reminds me of.
Totally. And thanks, Twitter, for bringing in some advertising. Okay, so... Christine, thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks for the question. Christine asks, what are some side projects / other communities you've built to secure your community career? Anybody, let's talk about this. This is interesting. You guys have side hustles?
I'm curious if we're talking internal or external. Also, because sometimes you have side projects internal and sometimes you have side projects external.
Well, we have plenty of time to talk both ways, you know.
I mean, for me, it's kind of obvious in the fact that I got super involved in my CMGR and CMGR Hangout, and now I'm on here every week, so kind of addressed a lot of the other questions too, but I'd love to hear what else you guys do.
So personally, this isn't something I do on the side anymore. But for a long time, while I was at O'Reilly, I was also running a local meetup. And now that meetup wasn't for community professionals; it was for designers, developers, marketers, etc. But it kept my community credentials sharp, basically. In a couple different contexts. So that was important. And then more recently, I went ahead and threw my hat in the ring for the Open Source Initiative's Board of Directors election, because that's a way that I can get more involved with specifically the communities I serve, which is open source communities. And so there are lots of ways that I think as community professionals we can find ways to serve our communities, not just in a professional salaried context. And if we can find those opportunities, then we're continuing to build credibility with the people that we want to keep serving, which will make us even more of an asset to companies who would hire us to do that.
One of the things that I do is I have my own blog that I do as just a hobby for cheap wine reviews, and then I also work with yeah, I mean, cheap wine doesn't have to be bad, right? I also work with my wife. She has a blog on her own, and so really kind of trying to figure out like what are ways that I can build those as communities as well, and those are kind of my playgrounds. I like to experiment with new things through there because there's really like no risk compared to trying to do something extremely risky with my job, and then I can take things that I learned and apply within those attempts to build community and pull them into what I'm doing over here to try to make them successful. I also, it's not necessarily a project, it's more just kind of in the nature of being helpful. I also know a lot of people within our area of town that are in startups. We have a startup incubator within San Antonio, and one of the things that I like to do is kind of keep tabs on those people and talk to them, and then also give some kind of recommendations or say, hey, I think your company could benefit from this since you're kind of at this stage of development within your product. Maybe you should look at doing something like actually launching a little bit of a feedback community, and then kind of like advising them from at this stage, kind of here's where you can start growing a little bit of a community presence, and then also start implementing more of the step-by-step aspects of overall community management into the organization. And that way it's kind of becomes part of the foundation of their product portfolio and support rather than something that's kind of added as an ancillary thought.
I think side projects are important, no matter what your job is. And Stuart, you kind of hit it for me, which was just that it's your way to gain experience, right? And to try some new things out. Yeah, I've done some cool big things with live video, and I've only had the I guess you could say the confidence because of experimenting here in this community and doing some things and understanding how some stuff works, you know. And I don't think I've ever would ever even consider doing some of those things unless it had been a side project. So. All right, guys. Well, we are running out of time, so to wrap us up, Sharon, do we have a topic for next week?
We do. We're talking open versus closed communities, so kind of looking at the differences between them.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, thank you for hanging out with us, Stuart and Josh. It was a pleasure. And everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.